Well, welcome everybody to another installment of What's Your Promise? My name is Matthew Cossolotto. I started this program to provide a forum for letting people share promises they've made in their lives. As you know, people have listened to the show before. We have a guest come on to talk about a promise that he or she made in their lives, and we probably get into other promises, not just one. And then we have a conversation, a little bit of a conversation about the importance and the power of making a promise. And so I'd like to start off this show with a reminder for everybody that Make a Promise Day is coming up on May 4th. So we're getting close to the second annual Make a Promise Day. And for those who've listened before, you know that I launched Make a Promise Day last year in a way as a part of a tribute to my mother, also basically as a way to continue a promise I made to my mother on her deathbed that I would finish writing a book and dedicate it to her memory. And in that dedication to the book I wrote called Habit Force, for some reason, I used the phrase, the power of making a promise, because I attributed the fact that I finished that book and kept my word to my mother, that I attributed that to the promise. And more recently, last year, I came up with this idea that maybe a special day, Make a Promise Day, would be another way to underscore and share this power of making a promise with more and more people. My mission now is to share the power of making a promise with millions of people around the world, because I think it's a real key to personal empowerment, to personal change, and actually to transforming the world. So I just want to remind people of what I'm now calling Matthew's mantra. It's 4 sentences, and I like to keep this top of mind for people. Make a promise, keep your word, change your life, transform the world. That summarizes for me the power of making a promise. But Kim Wright is our guest today, and I'd like to ask him the critical question. Kim, what's your promise? That's what I always ask when I bring a guest. What's your promise? So you don't have to jump right into it, Kim, but we'll get into your promise here in a minute. So welcome to the show, Kim.
Well, thank you,
Are
Matthew.
you there?
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
You bet. Yes.
Okay. So actually, I think I'll start with the context in which I made my promise, because you mentioned the impossible promise keepers. And I've been participating in landmark education programs for a long time. And in 1999, I was in a program called Power and Contribution. And our assignment in that course was to make a promise that was impossible and then to live into it and then to actually achieve it. And so the way that I came to make my promise was in that course, and then the Impossible Promise Keepers group actually was founded as a support group for those who had made impossible promises, and then eventually it grew to people who did the course in later years, and now we have several hundred members who are part of this mostly email community. And so that's the context of it. The promise that I made, that I promised a legal system transformed by 2010, where lawyers are peacemakers, problem solvers, and healers of conflicts, being agents of transformation with their clients. That's part one. And part two was building on that by 2012, I promised a world at peace, where all people realize their interconnectedness and honor conflict as an opportunity for transformation. And and I really appreciated what you were sharing here in the beginning, because there's a lot of my journey that is reflected in that. I did become a lawyer because I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to bring transformation. And that is not how lawyers are known. Right. So.
Well, there's some who have kind of an idealistic goal. I was not an attorney, didn't really aspire to be an attorney, but I have met some who have very altruistic kind of bent, but somehow it leaches out after a while. They get transformed maybe by the profession. I don't know, but you're sort of fighting that. You're going back to saying, well, wait a minute. There's a lot we can do to transform not only the profession and the court system and everything else that that we can actually become healers. I think isn't that one of your books or one of your messages is lawyers as healers?
Yes, actually my law practice in North Carolina was called Healers of Conflicts, which was based on a quote from Chief Justice Berger in 1984. He said, lawyers should be healers of conflicts.
Oh.
And that's where I got that particular way of phrasing it. But
so you could say, lawyer, heal thyself in this.
Well, yeah, exactly. Most lawyers go to law school, or most aspiring lawyers go to law school as normal people. Except that perhaps they're a little more idealistic than most people. There have been a lot of studies because something does happen to us in law school, and it's a shift that there are a lot of theories about it, but one of them is the shift to reason and the intellectual, and learning to think like a lawyer is about taking out the sort of the human qualities, the emotion, and so forth.
So it's more kind of a left brain profession, which it should be. You want your lawyer, I guess, to be really up on the facts, but and the law and the details. But you're suggesting that maybe there's something missing now. It has to do with maybe more emotion or heart or maybe empathy. Sometimes we hear about that with some of the Supreme Court nominees. Obama has said he wants a nominee. He wants someone on the court to be more empathetic, have more empathy.
Yes.
And that seems to be what you're alluding to.
There's nothing wrong with thinking like a lawyer. It's just that it's not the whole picture. And what I've been looking at is bringing the humanity back in. It's what people complain about regarding lawyers, is that all of those jokes about how we're sharks and various kinds of reptiles. It's that we have been trained out of that human, in neuroscience they would look at it in terms of the limbic system, the parts of us that connect to other people and have compassion and empathy and so forth. And so perfectly normal human beings go into law school, and then law school is designed to teach them to think like a lawyer, but law school doesn't teach them to regain that humanity when they're finished with the process. And so
it sounds like there's a balance, sort of a question of balance. Don't go too far in one direction, but balance it so that you retain some of that humanity or maybe some of that idealism that you talked about.
Exactly. And the other thing that happens, though, is that lawyers are miserable. Starting in about the same time they start losing their idealism and their humanity and their values, their intrinsic values, we actually begin to have a much higher rate of depression and addictive behaviors, from the whole spectrum of drugs, alcohol, and especially work addiction. And so we become people that are not whole and are not balanced.
Okay. So let's go back.
Then lawyers are miserable.
Yeah. Well, and then they make the rest of us miserable, right? Now, so that let's go back to the promise, just to get a little bit more clarity on the promise. Now, and I'm really intrigued by the promise, the challenge that you were given, this impossible promise, because I've actually issued, and later in this interview we may talk about this, but about you, but in terms of what I call take the promise challenge, I'm encouraging people to take the promise challenge, and I don't phrase it as an impossible promise necessarily, but to decide what goal or what objective or even a resolution or what it is that you feel like you want to achieve in your life. Maybe you've had trouble achieving it. Turn that into a promise. And all of a sudden this magic of making a promise comes into play, and I call it the two magic words, I promise. And so that's what I encourage people to take the promise challenge and tackle maybe that goal that you've had kind of lurking in the back of your mind for years and you haven't gotten around to it, or maybe you've tried to lose weight or whatever it is, and now turn it into a promise. And so that's why we talk about take the promise challenge. So you are given a challenge to actually, to literally promise something that's impossible, so big that it's, you know, it's going to keep you really, I guess, motivated, and you're going to need help, and you're going to have to really work on it for a long time. So that's really interesting to have this impossible promise. So,
well, and you may have noted that my promise was made in 1999,
yes.
And I promised to have the legal system transformed by 2010, and so I have failed. But for me, having a close deadline like that really kicked me into gear. Like if I'd promised it as of 2040, I probably would have waited until 2035 to start.
To start, right. You know, I understand.
Well, I think I made a lot of progress. So I'll just kind of, run through a few of the things that happened. So I was actually working as a lawyer, and I had no intention of not doing that just forever. When right after I made this promise, my then husband got a job offer across country in a place that I wasn't licensed to practice law. And I created a website because I didn't know what else. I knew how to create a website because my sister taught me, and I didn't know what else to do. And I captured everything I knew that was going on that was about lawyers being peacemakers, problem solvers, and healers of conflicts. And I put it up on the web. And over 100,000 people visited that site for the first year. And it kind of launched me as the person who was the sort of the clearinghouse for everything that was going on.
Is that website still there, by the way?
It actually, there is, the organization is called the Renaissance Lawyer Society. It was renaissancelawyer.com. And what happened was that when we shine the light on something, it starts growing. And so at that point, for example, the collaborative law movement consisted of about 50 collaborative lawyers around the world, and they were working in the area of divorce and at that point it was all divorce, although now it's spread beyond that, to help people create amicable agreements for taking care of their kids and restructuring their lives. And in collaborative law, the lawyers actually make a contract with their clients saying they won't go to court, and so all of their efforts are put on settlement. And so there were about 50 people doing that in 1999. And the latest numbers I have is that there are about 30,000 of them. They're in 20 countries. There's an organization that didn't even exist when I started doing the work I was doing, called the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, and they have going on 5,000 members, and it's become multidisciplinary, and so it's not that I grew that myself, but I was the person who helped other people find out about it by putting the information out on the web, and the same thing with about a dozen other approaches that I talked about. And so what I realized was that if I was going to create this promise of a legal system transformed, it wasn't just about me, and it wasn't that I might be the one who made the promise, but I needed a lot of people working. I really created my own website rather than that one became an organizational website. and it was impossible to keep up with it. At that time, we didn't have the dynamic tools we have now, and so when I built the next website, it's cuttingedgelaw.com, and and that one's really that one is where most of the information is now, and because it's more dynamic, it can be changed very, very quickly, and other people can work on it. Then a lot of the information from Renaissance Lawyer became outdated very, very quickly, and so now this site is up to date. And then because I launched that site in 2009, and the American Bar Association, which is the largest group of lawyers in the world with some 400,000 members, which is about maybe half the lawyers in the U.S., they took note of the work that I'd done on the website, which has hundreds of videos of lawyers who actually are achieving this and are role models. And they said, well, we knew this was the way that the law was going. We've been seeing this trend, but we had no idea it had gotten this far. Would you be willing to write a book about it? And so I did. Lawyers as Peacemakers, Practicing Holistic Problem-Solving Law was published by the ABA last year, and it was one of their bestsellers last year. And
yeah, I've seen that title. That's terrific. So the ABA, I mean, that's the citadel of the legal profession. That's where everything sort of happens. So you're working from within, in a sense, and proselytizing a little bit with the ABA to bring about the change that you promised you would bring about. So that's part of. So you're again stepping into that arena. You're changing things. And you're doing it consciously to keep your promise. I mean, that again, we're going back to the theme of this show, and my mission is to highlight this power of making a promise, that you're consciously reminding yourself that I made this promise. It was impossible, but I did it, and I'm going to keep working at it.
And it's made a difference out there in the world. A lot of lawyers are now practicing in different ways, and their clients are benefiting and all that. But I don't want to step over the difference it's made for me personally, because what it has done is it has made me a more courageous person, and it's stretched me beyond what I ever thought was possible. Because I have a promise, and when somebody would ask me to do something, my personality is very shy, and I would really rather be invisible. But early on, I was invited to speak to 1,100 people at a conference, and so as a personality and as the small person that I thought I was, I would have immediately said I can't do that. But because I had the promise and I knew that I was on a short timeline with the promise, I said, yeah. I sometimes say I'm a missionary in the sense that I am committed to my promise, which sometimes when people hear it as a promise, they don't understand it, but they can understand that it's my mission.
Yes, and I applaud the impossible promise, the concept of that. I applaud that because it really makes you think big. Because how do people reach you? Tell people how to reach you if you want them to.
Yeah, they can go to cuttingedgelaw.com and go to the contact link.
Right.
That comes to me.
Okay, and because there are probably a lot of lawyers out there who are looking to transform. Of course, you're working with the ABA, and you go out and you speak, and part of what you do is, and you coach attorneys. So any attorneys who might be listening, you want to coach, you go to that website and get in touch with Kim Wright, and it's been a pleasure. You're an inspiration, really, Kim. I want to thank you for being on What's Your Promise? I've enjoyed it a lot. I think we, unfortunately, have to sign off. So thank you for being on the show, and thank you to my listeners for listening in, and I'll see you again later on with another installment of What's Your Promise? Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for having me, Matthew.